Hello friends, I am Rajnish Arora. In the last two modules, we talked about Sinclair and Coulthard model and related studies. In this module, we will briefly discuss how Sinclair and Coulthard's model can be modified to suit drama analysis, taking cues from the studies based on the works related to the Birmingham model. We'll illustrate it with the help of an extended analysis of a transaction taken from John Osborne's Look Back in Anger. The analysis will allow us to compare the sequence of turns in drama with an analysis in terms of drama discourse structure made up of 3, 2 and 1 part exchanges, which will then take on meanings. On the basis of our discussion of the Sinclair and Coulthard model and related studies in the last two modules, we can say that for the analysis of dramatic dialogue, the Sinclair and Coulthard's framework can be modified at the level of acts. Following Burton's work in 1980 and Francis and Hunston's work in 1992, certain acts which are classroom specific may be dropped, and some acts which can cover the functions of utterance in real conversation and also in dramatic dialogue like accuse, excuse, challenge, request, clarify, suggest, etc. may be included without disturbing the basic framework in terms of the structure of transactions, exchanges, moves, etc. The exchange structure, that is initiation, response and feedback, can play an important role in identifying the conversational patterns of the dramatic dialogue. Most exchange types require a response to the initiation. If initiations are left without a response, it would indicate some kind of conflict or tension. It will be seen in the discourse structure as a series of one-part exchanges. Though the feedback or follow-up is rare in the dramatic dialogue, the empty third columns will have implications for the purpose of analysis. The choice of certain speech acts or discourse acts by different characters will add another dimension to the drama. Fairclough's criticism of the model for its lack of social orientation may be justified, but we are aware that concept of exchange structure is one of the powerful devices which Fairclough himself uses in his critical approach to discourse analysis. In the classroom situation, the power relationship between the teacher and students is well defined, and we can expect cooperative exchange structures. Other discourse types can be seen as a deviation from the classroom discourse. Do you know that Sinclair and Coulthard's model of discourse analysis can be fruitfully applied to drama dialogue without making any changes at the level of exchange and move? We only need to drop some acts which are classroom specific and introduce certain acts which occur in real life or in the world of drama. Let's go on to the analysis part. The analysis of a piece of dialogue taken from John Osborne's Look Back in Anger will illustrate our point. The transaction between Colonel Redfern and Allison, taken from Act 2, Scene 2, has 16 turns which have been numbered for ease of reference. Let me read out the stage directions and the dialogue for you. The following evening, When the curtain rises, Alison is discovered right, going from her dressing table to the bed and packing her things into a suitcase. Sitting down left is her father, Colonel Redfern, a large, handsome man, about 60. 40 years of being a soldier sometimes conceals the essentially gentle, kindly man underneath. Brought up to command respect, he's often slightly withdrawn and uneasy now that he finds himself in a world where his authority has lately become less and less unquestionable. Wife would relish the present situation, but he's only disturbed and bewildered by it. He looks around him, discreetly scrutinizing everything. Now let me read out the dialogue. Colonel, partly to himself, I'm afraid it's all beyond me. I suppose it always will be. As for Jimmy, he just speaks a different language from any of us. Where did you say he'd gone? Alison, he's gone to see Mrs. Tanner. Colonel, who? Alison, Hugh Tanner's mother. Colonel, oh, I see. Alison, she's been taken ill. A stroke. Hugh's abroad, as you know, so Jimmy's gone to London to see her. He wanted me to go with them. Colonel, didn't she start him off in this sweet stall business? Alison, yes. Colonel, what's she like? Nothing like her son, I trust. Alison, oh, how can you describe her? Rather ordinary. What Jimmy insists on calling working class. A charwoman who married an actor, worked hard all her life and spent most of it struggling to support her husband and her son. Jimmy and she are very fond of each other. Colonel, so you didn't go with him? Alison, no. Colonel, who's looking after the sweet stall? Alison, Cliff, he should be in soon. Colonel, oh yes, of course, Cliff. Does he live here too? Alison, yes, his room is just across the landing. Now I would like you to look at this table which shows the exchange structure, the structure of discourse, you can say. Can you see the slots? Can you see the columns? I would like you to go through it for about 5 minutes and discuss description and analysis. As you can see, the transaction has 11 exchanges, out of which 3 exchanges are 1 part, 6 are 2 part, and the remaining 2 are 3-part exchanges. A majority of initiations, that is 72.72%, are answered with an appropriate reply, which indicates a lot of convergence between Colonel Redfern and his daughter Alison. The discourse structure shows that out of 11 exchanges, 8 are initiated by Colonel Redfern and only 3 exchanges initiated by Alison. Therefore, Colonel Redfern, with his 72.72% initiations, appears to be the most dominating character than Alison in the transaction. Out of 8 exchanges initiated by Colonel Redfern, 5 exchanges are answered with cooperation by Alison, whereas only 1 initiation out of 3 made by Alison is answered with a cooperative response. The transaction begins with Colonel Redfern initiating the move in which he self-selects. The first three utterances of Colonel Redfern are coded as starter, starter, and comment respectively, which constitute the initiating move. The first two utterances as starter direct our attention to the third utterance, that is a comment. No response comes, we get empty slots under responding and follow-up moves, and we get the first one part exchange of the transaction. The exchange is named commenting exchange after the head act of the opening move, as you see in the table. Colonel Redfern's fourth utterance selects Alison, which is part of the same first turn and is coded as elicitation. In discourse act terms, it is an elicitation as it expects a linguistic response of supplying a piece of information. In speech act terms, it fulfills the main felicity conditions for elicitation, that is question, that is the speaker does not have the information and wants to have sincerely. Alison responds to in discourse act terms, it's an elicitation as it expects a linguistic response of supplying a piece of information. In speech act terms, it fulfills the main felicity condition for elicitation or question. That is, the speaker does not have the information and wants to. In speech act terms, it fulfills the main felicity conditions for elicitation or question. That is, the speaker does not have the information and wants to have sincerely. Alison responds to her father's elicitation with an appropriate reply that satisfies the pragmatic presuppositions of the preceding elicitation, and we get a two-part exchange. In conversation analysis terms, we call it an adjacency pair. Similarly, Alison's father opens another exchange with an elicitation which also gets an appropriate second part as a reply. As he chooses to acknowledge the reply, we get a three-part exchange. Alison then self-selects and supplies a piece of information in her initiating move in exchange 4. Alison's first utterance in this move is coded as starter as it directs our attention to the following informative and makes the appropriate response to the initiation more likely. In discourse act terms, an informative expects an acknowledgement as the most appropriate response. In speech act terms, it is an informative as it fulfills the felicity condition that the speaker believes that the addressee does not have the information and wants to have sincerely. Alison's father gives a non-verbal response in the form of a nod, which is coded as acknowledge in the discourse structure, which gives us another adjacency pair. Alison's next utterance opens another informing exchange with an utterance. This utterance is considered another piece of information as it occurs after Alison's father's acknowledgement to the initiating move of the previous informing exchange 4. As the initiating move in 5 is not acknowledged, it remains a one-part exchange in the discourse structure. With Alison's father's next initiation and an appropriate response, we get another elicitation reply adjacency pair in 6. Alison's father opens another exchange, 7, with an elicitation. This opening move has two utterances which have been coded as starter and elicitation. His elicitation gets a longer reply this time, and we get a responding move consisting of starter as pre-headact, reply that is in form as headact, and two additives as post-head acts. The function of an additive here is to add another piece of information of a similar nature to the previous reply. With the next utterance in the same turn, Alison opens an exchange 8, which has been given the communicative value of a comment, and we get a one-part exchange as it is not acknowledged by her father. Alison's father's next utterance opens another exchange with an elicitation, which gets a confirmation as reply in the second pair part, that is 9. In speech act terms, one of the felicity conditions that the speaker does not have the information and wants to have sincerely is not fulfilled. This is a case where the speaker has the information but wants the addressee to confirm it. The next two exchanges are 10 and 11, which again are called eliciting exchanges after the head act of the initiating moves. Both the exchanges are initiated by Alison's father and are answered with appropriate replies by Alison, and one of the replies in exchange 10 gets an acknowledgement by Alison's father, giving us the second three-part exchange of the transaction. It is evident in the discourse structure that it is Alison who always occurs in the responding move. She gives simple, straightforward answers to all the elicitations, and all her replies satisfy the pragmatic presuppositions of her father's questions and elicitations. It is Alison's father who acknowledges the responses of Alison in the follow-up move of two exchanges. He never comes in the responding moves. All these are indicators of the dominating role of Alison's father in the course of the transaction. 11 exchanges of the transaction correspond to 16 turns. The greater the difference between the number of turns, more cooperative the discourse is. But if one participant always comes in the initiating move and the other participant occurs generally in the responding move, the cooperation is generally taken for granted by the more powerful member of the discourse. This issue is linked to language as social practice, which we'll discuss later. The dominant character of Alison's father is reflected in turn allocation patterns. It is Colonel Redfern who either self-selects or allocates turns to Alison, as it is an interaction between two participants. The number of turns is equal. The length of turns taken by Alison and her father is more or less the same. Though they are equal in so many ways, Alison's father dominates over her. This is reflected in a number of other ways, as we have mentioned earlier. It is again Alison's father who introduces the topic, which of course revolves around only Jimmy. He controls the topic throughout the transaction, which shows that he has power over his daughter. Another indicator of power is the choice of felicitations. As such, the transaction is dominated by 63.63% eliciting exchanges. Informing and commenting exchanges occur in equal proportions, that is 18.18% each. This is an interesting case in that it is Alison's father who uses all the elicitations after beginning the transaction with a commenting exchange. Alison never uses elicitations but initiates two informing and commenting exchanges. The intended perlocutionary effect of all the speech acts is achieved except in a couple of commenting or informing exchanges perhaps. It is, however, important to point out that the categories of comment or informative can also be acknowledged by a person's gaze. Therefore, one part commenting or informing exchanges cannot be straightaway interpreted in terms of non-cooperation or tension. There are no instances of flouting of any maxim. Both Alison and Alison's father do not use any face-threatening acts like accusing, challenging, directing, etc. In exchange 1, even though Alison herself is unhappy with Jimmy, Colonel Redfern's comments may threaten Alison's positive face as it contains some element of complaint. Everything said and done, Colonel Redfern's linguistic behavior is comparable to a teacher's discourse in a traditional classroom. The use of elicitation gives the father a position of authority, which is a consequence of naturalized assumption which contributes to the relations of domination by seeking to sustain them. Did you see the two characters in conversation? What do they say to each other? What's your name? My name is Rakesh. Oh, I see. Haven't we met? Yes, we have. In this dialogue, both the characters cooperate with each other, and discourse structure will also reflect the same. Clearly, the dialogue has two exchanges, one three-part exchange and the second two-part exchange, and there's a boundary in the middle of A's second turn. Go through another animation. What do the characters say to each other? What's your name? Why do you ask? Now, clearly, there's no cooperation which would be reflected in the discourse structure with two one-part exchanges. The analysis of the transaction above makes it clear. The analysis of the transaction that we have discussed makes it clear why it is useful to retain the basic exchange structure, initiation, response, and feedback. They correspond to opening, answering, and follow-up moves. The analysis shows that the system is flexible, which can be fruitfully applied to the language of drama. We can also see that it can be extended to include a critical analysis of drama, which highlights the utility of the Birmingham model. I'm sure by now you would have a fair idea of how we can analyze a drama or a piece of drama using the Birmingham model. But I would suggest that you go through this module once again and spend some time on it. I would also suggest that you take some chunks from any drama and try to convert it into discourse structure yourself. That would give you an idea of whether you can do it yourself or not. If you have any problems, you can go through the modules again and see for yourself how you can best do it on your own. Thank you.